Well, I was born, of course, over here in Dunlap, and my dad was a coal miner. He and my grandfather, too. My grandfather moved to Palmer first from here, and then we moved out there. I think I was 8 years old when we moved to Palmer. And we stayed with my grandfather for about 10 days till they got us a house ready over in the community they called Chiggertown. And we moved over there.
Okay.
And I remember the weeds and the briars and things that was around the house. Dad had to take a big tube of 12 and set it up at the kitchen door and shove it out in the weeds so we could get out of the house. He spent many an hour cleaning that place up, and they had fences around the lots, and we didn't fence to keep our cattle in. We fenced to keep the cattle out.
Okay. Now, tell me, growing up there, you brothers and sisters, or tell me.
Oh, I had 3 brothers and 2 sisters.
Okay. Now, how long were you at Palmer now?
Oh, we were at Palmer from 19 and I don't know what year it was when we moved out there, but we moved away from Palmer during the Second World War. I went to work for Combustion Engineering Company, Chattanooga. But that's after we married and had 2 kids.
Okay. Now, when you were at Palmer there, how did you first meet the Cagle clan out there? What was?
Well, I ran a filling station for Tennessee Consolidated Coal Company, and they lived down between there and the grammar school, and they just had a little house out behind their house, and they used that little house for their tools and to get in there in the wintertime and warm a little bit. And they did all of their mechanical work outside. And they had lights.
They did, I didn't know that.
Oh yeah, and they had all the lights, place lit up all over, real good. And I've seen those boys lay out there on tarpaulins under trucks, and it pouring down the rain. That was the only repair shop there was in Palmer.
It was?
Yeah.
Tell me how old Burton was.
Burton was 12 years old when I ran that station, and he was the only one I'd credit. He'd come up there with a 5-gallon can, and he'd said, Mr. Mack, I want a 5-gallon of gas on the credit. And I'd say, help yourself. And he'd come back, when he'd get the money, he'd come back and pay me.
So, do you remember much about Eston?
No, Eston was a little bit, he was older than Burton, of course. And he was always, he worked like a dog down there as a mechanic. But outside of that, I didn't know him much.
Okay. Can you tell me any stories there about living out on the mountain, about my dad, or just other stories that you'd like to tell?
You and Burton Crandel. You and Burton fixing it.
Oh, I think it was a 32 model Chevrolet. And Burton overhauled the engine for me when he was 12 years old.
12?
He was 12 years old when he overhauled that engine. And after he moved down here down to Jasper, every once in a while he'd call me and he'd say, Crandel? I'd say, yes, sir. He said, how you doing? I said, oh, I'm doing all right. How are you? I'm not doing too good. Goodbye. And he'd call me that way every once in a while. He'd say something, say goodbye, and hang up.
I told him one time, I said, some people might not understand you because when you're done, you're through talking on the phone.
Yeah.
And he says, well, what do you mean? I said, well, some people might think that you hang up on them.
No.
And he says, well, I wouldn't hang up on anybody. And I said, but they might think so. Do you ever think about telling someone goodbye? He says, well, hell, they know me. They know I'm not being rude.
He was elected constable down there for several years. And the last time I saw Burton, Lanny and I, my son, and I went down there to see him. And we were standing around there talking in the garage. Looked over up on the shelf, and there was an old car fender up there, and I think it was a Hudson. You know, Burton used to sell Hudson automobiles. I bought one from him in 1952, I believe it was, and I gave him $2,500 for it, brand new one.
Oh,
That's right. And Lanny sold some antique automobiles for a fellow in South Pittsburgh, and there was one of them in the lot, and he got I think he got $2,900 for it.
he did.
Yeah.
Oh, I know he sold that big Packard sign that he had there.
Oh, Packard's what they were. Packard. He sold Hudson's first, and they proved they weren't worth a hoot. They were the poorest automobile I believe I've ever seen. Right over in the corner, each corner of the windshield, the windshield leaked, and each side of the windshield had a little cup in it, back like that, and a tube that ran down outside.
No way.
That's right.
I never heard of such a thing. Well, so I guess that's why Hudson just didn't make it, huh?
That's right. They went out of business, and then he started selling the Packard, wasn't it?
He sold. It seems like to me as a kid growing up that at one point every other car in the county was a Packard.
Yeah.
I mean that was per capita. It seemed like he was, selling a lot of Packards.
Well, I bought a new 52, and a guy down there at South Pittsburgh bought a new 53, and it had a V8 engine in it. The one I had a straight 8. And the only thing I had wrong with it, that I could ever had wrong with it was the block would break right in the middle in the water.
That's a pretty big problem.
Yeah, and you crank it up, but until it got warm, and it'd straighten out. But you had to watch the water in the radiator.
Wow. Now, when you moved to Marion County there, how did you get involved? You were in the Boy Scouts there for a long time. How did that happen?
Well, I really don't know how I got started in the Boy Scouts.
Didn't you go to a meeting that the men had?
Oh, I belonged to the Lions Club. Oh, I do know how I got involved too. I belonged to the Lions Club, and we had a guy there that was scoutmaster. His name was Hogue, Joe Hogue. And he had a bad car wreck and crippled himself, and he couldn't handle the boys anymore. He called me and he said, "McNabb, so will you take charge of this Boy Scout troop till I can get on my feet again?" And I said, "Yes, I will." I was already affiliated with the Boy Scouts in some capacity, but it wasn't leading a troop. And I took over that troop, and 20 years later I gave it up. I couldn't get anybody to fool with it.
Yeah.
I went to 2 national jamborees, one in Colorado Springs and the other one in somewhere in Pennsylvania. And I've got a whole wall full of plaques in yonder that I've earned. Mm-hmm. I've earned everything that the Boy Scouts of America gives to volunteer. Silver beaver and the whole bit.
Wow.
And do you remember the Paul Harris fella?
I think so.
I've got one of them hanging on the wall in there.
Yeah.
Johnny Moore used to be in my Boy Scout troop, and he instigated that. And they took me, Jim Gentry, and Wanda took Ethel and I over to the
Chattanooga Country Club.
The what?
Chattanooga Country Club.
Chattanooga Country Club, and they had dinner for us over there.
And Dr. Who was the doctor from
Dr. Havern.
Havern was with you.
Yeah, Dr. Havern and another guy. I've got the pictures in there on the wall.
Well, you're well thought of in the county, and a lot of it, of course, a lot of the young kids at the time, grew up and ran a lot of businesses in town. Do you have any idea how many people in this area care about you and all for the Boy Scouts that got to know you back then?
I don't know, not in this area. I don't know.
Well, you're well known in the Marion County area, that's for sure.
Is that right?
Well, sure you are. Sure you are. So you were in the Boy Scouts. So you gave that up. You were talking about in the Boy Scouts. My brother Danny got into a couple of little altercations. Did you remember any of that?
Yeah, we took.
Now he tried to accuse me earlier over at Gentry there. He said, "Yeah, I remember. I said you in the tent one night." I said, "Well, wait a minute. I got into a couple of scrapes, but I don't remember."
I was sitting there. The kids were all out after supper. They were all out in front of the tent playing. I was sitting in front of my tent reading a book, and I looked up, and Danny and another boy was into a fight. And I got up and went out there and parted them. Told them, I said, "You boys go to your tents till you cool off a little." Well, the other boy went to his tent and stayed, and Danny didn't. He just went to his tent and right out, and I looked up, and there he was playing again. I went out there and I said, "Danny, didn't I tell you to go to your tent?" And he said, "Yes, sir." I said, "Well, get in there." And he just stood there. I said, "You mean that's not, you say, you're not going?" He said, "That's right." And I just jerked him across my knee and spanked him real good. And he yelled, you could hear him clear across the lake. And I stood him up and shook him a little bit, and he went to his tent and stayed.
Yeah.
And about an hour or so after that, I thought about Danny again, and I went to see about him. And there he was laying on his bunk with his clothes on.
Yeah.
And I just took his shoes off and put a blanket over him and let him stay there all night. Next morning he got up like nothing had ever happened.
Yeah. You never did find out what that little fight was about?
No, I
Could have been
didn't.
anything.
No, I wasn't interested. And when I came home, Burton loaned me a van to take some of the kids over there, and I went straight in and told him about it.
Yeah.
And I was down next to the parts department when I told him, and there was an old man that was looking after the parts there. And I told Danny, Burton, I said, I had to spank Danny. And he said, "Did he need it?" And I said, "Yeah." He said, "Good," and just walked off. And this old man heard me say that, and he said, "Do you mean you spanked Danny?" And I said, "Yes, sir." He said, "Well, good." So that's the first time he'd ever got spanked in his life. I always thought a lot of Danny.
Well, we were accused of being pretty spoiled kids, growing up. So I thought that was funny that we were talking about Danny, and he's never mentioned any of that stuff.
No, the last time I saw Danny was in Hale's store down there, and he was working at Raccoon Mountain. Is he still up there?
Yeah, he's still up there. And I ran across a guy there that works with him. I sold him one of my boats here a few months ago, and he works with Danny up there. Mm-hmm. And he said, "I'll tell you one thing. There's one man that knows where every nut and bolt is up there at that Raccoon Mountain, and that's Danny Cagle."
Is that right?
So if there's any problem of any kind, he's the guy they go to.
Good man to have around.
He said he knows it inside out, upside down, around about. He don't forget anything when it comes to that Raccoon Mountain.
I understand they won't let you in there now.
I don't know.
We went in there once.
You did? You went into Raccoon Mountain?
Yeah.
A long time ago, though.
Yeah.
Well, was it like what you thought it might be when you?
I think so. Yeah. You went in from upstairs, 1,000 feet high, and went down on an elevator, just like that, and you didn't even realize you was going down till you got down and let you out, and then you had to go down a long runway to a barrier. And you could stand behind this fence and look at the generators down there. Mm-hmm. It was real interesting to look at.
Wow. Well, so far as y'all lived in Jasper there for how long? Y'all were there for a while.
Oh yes, I went down there
in 49.
In 1940, January the 1st, wasn't it, hon?
It was for. No, you went in the middle of the summer because of some reason.
Yeah.
And I stayed to the school with that.
Yeah.
It was 49.
Yeah, 1949.
Well, you've seen a lot of changes. And here we are, going through a big time recession. Stock market's gone crazy
Yeah.
again. And what do you think about all this mess?
Somebody's gone to sleep at the wheel, haven't they?
That sounds like something my dad would say. 100%, I agree. Do you think that this is going to be a short-term thing, or you have any idea?
Well, Ben, it's got to be. This country can't hold out forever. And loaning the automobile companies money is about the best thing they can do, because, you know, now we live on our automobiles. I mean, we live out of an automobile, just about it. Nearly every family in this country got 2 cars in their garage. And that to me, that's what slows down the sale of automobiles. People got 2 cars and they say, I don't need another one. The only way they can need another one is junk the one they've got.
Mm-hmm. When you guys made the trips down to Florida?
Well, I pulled that trailer down there for 3 different winters. And I thought, shoot, this is too much. So I took it down there and rented the lot. It was a fenced-in lot anyway, campground. It was 3 miles this side of Fort Myers. And I just took it down there and set it up and left it. Paid rent on it the year round. And well, then we drove back and forth in our station wagon.
Okay. And so you made several trips down there?
We done there 10 different times.
10 different times.
And I had a friend down there that was a real estate agent. When I got ready to leave, I told him what I was going to do. He said, I'll sell that trailer for you. And he sold it to a woman it was coming down there from Ohio. And we
How
paid.
long did it take to sell it? Was it short term?
Well, just overnight, just almost.
Wow.
And he wouldn't take a penny for it.
He wouldn't?
No. He was a friend of mine. I wondered, his wife died, and I wondered what was happening to him.
Well, the last time we heard from him was at Christmas time.
You and Jim Gentry go way back. Jim is a dear friend of mine. I
Yeah.
love him just like a member of my family.
Yeah.
So how did you and Jim Gentry meet? I know you're extremely loyal to Jim as far as buying cars. I mean, what? Tell me about your relationship with old Jim.
Well, when I had a body shop in Jasper, I went down there and when I went down there, there wasn't a body shop in the valley. And I started one in the back of old man Gass's garage. And I finally went, a boy there in town wanted to work with me, and I put him to work, and he had a building over there where I finally settled down, and he and I went in partnership. He furnished the building, and I furnished the know-how. And his wife got sick, and he had to take her to Florida. And when I left me by myself, and they was going to charge me rent on the building, so I said, no, I don't want to do that. So I went to South Pittsburgh and worked at the Ford place for a while. And it sold out 2 or 3 times, and I got aggravated. And old man Anderson run the Plymouth and Chrysler place down there below. He told me, he said, anytime you want to come down here and work, you just let me know. So I took my tools and went down there one day, and I said, here I am. He said, they had a barn out there that had a body shop in it. And I worked there for a long time. And finally, Webb, a car dealer in Jasper, a fellow named Webb, Forrester Webb, he said, I'll build you a building down here if you will come up here and work with me. And said, we'll go in together. So he built me a building, and I noticed it going by there the other day, parts of it burned out down behind there. I'd like to go down there and look at it sometime. But I went up there and stayed until I went.
Smitty's barbershop, wasn't it?
What on?
At the back of Smitty's barbershop.
Yeah, back behind the barbershop there. And finally, I was on the frame machine one day working on a car, and an old man that ran a Chevrolet place in Tracy City. I can't remember what his name was. Anyway, he come walking in there with a pair of white shoes on, And I climbed out from under there, and he said, "Are you Mr. McNabb?" I said, "Yes." He said, "I've got a body shop, a Chevrolet dealership in Tracy City, and I need a body man, bad." And he said, "Would you come and work with me?" I said, "I don't know. I'll have to study about it." And he said, "How much would you have to have a week to come up there?" And I told him. He said, "Oh, I don't pay nobody that much." And I said, "That's what it'll take." And he says, "Do I have to let you know right now?" And I said, "No." So he went back, and the next day he called me. He said, "If you let me, I'll send a truck down there and get your tools and things." And I said, "No, I'll make it all right." And he said, "Come up here and go to work for me right now." And I went up there, and he had wrecked automobiles all over the lot. Had a highway patrol car out there, the front end mashed in on it. And there was 2 young boys up there working. And when I went, and one of them was just a kid, and one of them was, I found out about a week that would turn out to be a good body man. And I told him, I said, "Now how much authority do you want me to have in back there?" And he said, "Run it like you want it." So I went back there and told that boy, I said, "I need you in yonder on the wash rack." And that made him mad, and he quit. And he come in there about 2 or 3 months after that and said, "Mr. Mack said the best thing that ever happened to me." And I said, "What?" He said, "I went to work for a combustion engineering company." And he said, "Now I make a living now." And says, I wasn't making anything here." And I said, "Well, I knew that." But the other boy turned out to be a good body man. And I put him on a 50% pay. And he made $125 the first week, and the old man, what you call him, he sponsored Lawrence Welk.
Who was it?
Oh, golly.
From Tracy City.
I don't remember.
A fellow named Crichton bought his place out, and the man's got a body shop out there now.
Wow. Well, when you had a body shop in Jasper, what made you decide, well, I'm just going to open up a body shop? Had you wanted to do that? What kind of training did you have? Or?
Well, I worked at a combustion engineering company until the war was over. And when the war was over, they was going to cut me back to a first class helper, and I didn't want that. And I'd worked hard to get to be a crew chief, and I quit. And when I quit, I went uptown. A friend of mine was in charge of a bus program uptown that ran from Nashville to Knoxville to Chattanooga, and they ran a commuter bus over to Whitwell. And I went up there and talked to him. He said, "McNabb," he says, "if you'll come over here and drive that commuter bus from here to Whitwell, I'll let you take the bus on home with you," and says, "You can work here during the day." And I painted 15 buses.
15 buses?
That painted it, you know, the trailway,
Yeah.
red and white.
Yeah.
I painted 15 of those, made them just exactly like the picture.
Mm-hmm.
And they bought a brand new 29 passenger bus, and some guy ran into a horse out on Cumberland Mountain and tore the front end out of it. And I put that, we had to order that from the factory, and I put that in, and I learned to do paint and body work there. And when
That's if I had to do something like that, there's no way in the world I could start to do something like. You got to have a talent to do something like that. How did you learn how to?
I don't know.
By just doing it.
That's right, just doing it.
So you knew how to like do a complete front end on a car?
Yeah. This little 29 passenger bus was the prettiest bus you ever saw. It had the engine in the back. The rest of them had the engines up front. Mm-hmm. And that horse just knocked the fire out of it.
Yeah.
Tore it up. They sent it to the factory and got some more parts. And I tore those others off and put the new ones on.
Yeah. Well, now my brother Danny, talking about Danny a while ago, he's got a natural talent for stuff like that, and there's no way that I could begin to do anything. I remember he would actually, when we drove to Kirkman in high school, he would actually change motors in his car from one night to the next.
Is that right?
He would actually go to, and he would take if we were in a Ford, he would like put another motor, like a Chevrolet motor, in a Ford. I said, well, how did you do that? He said, well, I just put some special mounts in the, and he would just make it work.
Yeah, yeah.
And that always amazed me.
Yeah.
Because if I had all the right parts for the right car, I still couldn't get that thing started. Yeah, but he just got a natural ability.
Yeah, well, when I had a body shop down there in Jasper, a guy, the photographer there in Jasper, come over there and made some pictures. And they made a picture of my shop and Burton's big old wrecker out in front of it. And I've had the picture here, and I've lost it here somewhere. I can't find it.
Yeah, you mentioned that.
It was painted white, black and white.
Yeah.
And it had 4 wheels on the back. It'd pick up a truck.